ISO FileMaker Magazine, the professional's resource for FileMaker know-how. Hey there, my fellow FileMaker learners and developers. This is Matt Petrowski bringing you these tutorials from my website, FileMakerMagazine.com. Maybe soon to be named something else, because it's going to be Claris Pro, not FileMaker Pro. We've got the news now. Anyway, this video is about portals, searching, and how it relates to setting up your interface. We're going to be learning some things that we need to do with regards to planning out our database. All right, let's take a look at my file. All right, thanks so much for joining me here on my desktop. I'm going to be taking you through things that I am putting into a database as I'm developing the database. This is the continuation of the series. If you're interested in going to any other particular video and you're watching this on YouTube, there is a link down below that you can click that will take you to the series. So in this specific video, what we are taking a look at is we are looking at the two different types of portals, as I've selected a portal that I have right here on screen. FileMaker added a particular type of portal that didn't previously exist in FileMaker that we had to create ourselves in the relationship graph. But there is still a reason to use that particular type of portal and know how it impacts how your solution is actually going to function. And what I mean by this is there's this concept known as master detail. In other words, you have a master list of items and then you have details over on the side. So in this regard, this portal is your master, I believe, and then your detail is over here on the other side when you select a particular item. Now, this isn't always what you want, and you need to know what your options are in terms of implementing an alternative. So the first thing that we're going to do is take a look at what is the default that FileMaker gives us, and I forget when they added it. It may have been FileMaker 17 or 18, and it looks like this. We go up to the portal tool, we select that, and we're able to add a new portal. Now, when we add a new portal, and I'll do it right over here in this area, we simply just drag out the initial portal of what we're going to want it to be. And by default, FileMaker comes up with this show records from, and you used to select a table occurrence. Now, FileMaker defaults to the current table. Now, in this regard, there's a very important distinction that we need to know about this portal versus any other portal. And that is that this portal is a direct representation of what the found set is that the user is currently looking at. So you have to recognize that a portal, you're able to control what is shown within a portal if you take control from the aspect of building it into your relationship graph. If you use this default portal that FileMaker gives us by default, really you're just showing the found set. And that is how it works. So we'll take a look at how this actually works, because over here, as I cancel this process out, I just wanted to draw the portal for you. This, as I double click, is what we would think of as a master detail portal. We can see that it is coming from the current table of products. Now, obviously, I would be able to select any other table occurrence, anything that is related, or you could select unrelated. Well, sometimes you can, but almost never you will. Whatever your current context is, whatever the layout is based off of, it's tied to a base table. That base table, according to your graph, is going to be able to see certain other table occurrences. Well, you can always connect a table occurrence to itself based on whatever that relationship is based on. Now, if that's confusing to you right now, hopefully it'll become more clear when we implement a self relationship, which I'll put into this particular file. But for right now, we need to see the correlation or the relationship between what is actually happening when we search. In FileMaker, one of your primary methods, I think of it as two. There are two primary methods of filtering out data, meaning showing a smaller subset of information that's important to the user based on what they're doing currently. Those two methods are, you can use a relationship in order to filter data, or you can use a find. Now, a find is going to be the most common way to do that. And in the follow-up video in this series, we're going to see how you have to make some choices based on find and what happens and some of the defaults that FileMaker puts onto a file that maybe you don't want to have as defaults. So what we can see right here is we currently have a found set of 8 records. And in this home database that I'm building, I initially started with products and quotes. I have more tables that are being added. In this particular situation, let's think of products right now. I initially started products. It's going to ultimately be manufacturers. We're going to get the data structure right. But right now we have a list of providers that provide certain products. We can see right here, we select on Anderson, and it's going to have a particular application. This is just a radio set, and we're going to learn all kinds of stuff about value lists and what's better in terms of dynamic value lists versus static value lists. But for right now, we know that this portal is tied to this found set. So in other words, if the total number of records that are displayed changes, the contents of the portal changes as well to represent directly the found set. So a common thing would be, I'm going to go into find mode, and we can see all the modes right up here when we go to view. And find mode is just FileMaker's method for performing a search. Now, there's multiple things we'll talk about with regards to searching, but I'm going to go into find mode with Command F. This is what's known as query by form. In other words, anything you can see in the presented form, you can query, hence the little magnifying glass on each of the exposed fields. Now, you can also search on non-exposed fields in FileMaker if it's a scripted process, because you have access to all fields via your scripts. But in this case, let's say I was going to search for this checkbox of anything that is related to, in these products, if their application deals with the porch. So quite clearly, we can see that the found set, 1 out of 8, comes up, and my portal is only showing the 1 record. So this may not be what my objective is in terms of how I'm providing filtering and navigation to the user. In other words, I would think that this is actually not a good UI unless I draw attention to the user by giving them some type of very obvious indication. Like right here, I have an all button. This all button, when we go into layout mode and we double click this button, we're going to see that it is currently a single step. I've not made it into a script, and is simply using the show all records step. Now, what that's going to do in browse mode is it's simply going to say, change my found set from the 1 out of 8 that I found and just show everything. But we can think about this. What's the likelihood that I'm going to end up with 10,000 products in this database? It's pretty high. I am going to end up with a portal that could potentially show a lot of records, 10,000 records. Now, we ask ourselves, what is the performance impact of showing a user 10,000 records? Does Google ever, when you search Google, does it ever show you all 10,000 items? Absolutely not. It does what's called pagination, and they only show you the top 10. And then if you want to go beyond that, you can go to page 2 or page 3 and basically go down the rabbit hole of all of your search results. We want to keep that same thing in mind when we're working with FileMaker, we're designing our database, and we're choosing certain features and functionality. Now, I can click all, and currently it's no big deal. I've got 8 records listed, but I'm going to have to come up with a situation that solves my problem, that allows a user to filter what they want to work on. Let's say, for example, I'm dealing with, I want to know all of the product providers or manufacturers that provide products related to building a porch. In this case, we've got a super simple radio button. We're going to need to fix that. We will in future videos. But for right now, what might be a better approach? And that might be a portal that allows me to put in a UI where I have more control over what is shown within this portal. Because if you don't already know, I've expressed it in a lot of my other videos that you find both on YouTube and on the FileMaker magazine website, which, by the way, if you're interested in this file, you can always get access to the file over at the FileMaker magazine website for whatever I end up adding to this file. As a subscriber, that's what you'll have access to, plus many other videos with a lot of content. So we want to be able to think about this. We want to be able to have a portal that can be used for navigation, navigating the products that maybe a user is looking to find or deal with that are filtered based on a particular topic, or in this case, a particular tag, as I think of them. So we're going to do that by creating a portal. Let's do that now. All right, so we are going to create what's known as a self relationship. Now, in order to understand this, as I go into the defined database and we go to the relationships tab, we need to know that everything that we're structuring here in the relationship graph does impact performance. What's connected to what? How many things are connected together in terms of where the user is? Is the user on a layout based on this table occurrence? And what can it see around it? Is the user on this table occurrence? And currently what I have is a situation where I'm creating layouts based on these core tables that they commonly can see a files table. In other words, they're sharing the same table. I can have quotes that come in as PDFs. Those PDFs can be stored be stored in the files table. I also have products, and those products are coming from manufacturers, and they have manufacturer specifications. They also are PDFs and can be stored within the files. Now, off here to the side, we see this globals. Now, if you've never built a FileMaker database, there are these field types called globals, which are actually specific. They're local just to the user. The word is confusing because global, it's not global to everybody. It's actually global to the file, but it's specific to the user. So that means that things are stored within this are user specific. Now, one of the things that we're going to see in an upcoming video is I have a field called search, which means that when user A searches for something, it doesn't impact user B because a global field is local to the user, meaning user A doesn't see what user B is searching for, and the inverse applies as well. Very important concept to understand. But we need to create a self relationship. And in order to do that, we can do it in multiple ways. But I'm going to use a global field. So the reason that I draw your attention to the globals is that I'm using a dedicated table here in this file called globals, hence it's all capitalized. Now that capitalization is just because it's a methodology that I choose to use, but within this globals table, the only thing I will ever have are global fields or unstored calculated fields. In this particular case, I've got so many, exceptions in this situation. The record ID field, get record ID, does not have to be unstored. So there's an exception about this, but normally what you're going to see in a globals table is a global designation for a field or an unstored, and this one just happens to be an exception to that rule. I'm not going to put my global, which is going to have a list of keys in it for a self relationship, into this globals table. I'm going to put the global field into the dedicated table where I'm going to be using this other type of portal, this navigation. That means it's going to be in products currently. So here I'm going to add a field, and I'm going to call it, you can call it whatever you want currently, and I'm going to call it portal. I'm going to create that field. I'm then going to click on my options, go to the storage, and make it a global storage value, meaning this now makes it so that it's local. User A can have something completely different than user B in this particular field. And in this portal, I'm now going to create a self relationship. So we go to the relationships and on the products, and here's where you can put things in place in your FileMaker system as you're learning them, but sometimes what you've added throughout the process of learning might be contributing performance hits to your database. And so you might want to rethink and then adapt the database as it evolves. So just because we're adding it now doesn't mean that this is always going to stay like this. Many times in your development cycle, you're rethinking things and rearranging how they work. That's what's great about FileMaker. It's very flexible. So a self-relationship means that products is going to see into itself. So what I did is I held the option key and took a copy of this table occurrence. And I'm now going to, you can either click on this little arrow or you can drag it all the way so that you can expose it. Or there's another opportunity that you can use when you're making a connection. This becomes very important when you have a lot of fields. When you end up having over 100 fields, which I do not suggest in a FileMaker situation. If you have FileMaker systems that have more than 500 fields in a particular table, something is wrong. Your database needs to be refactored. Very rarely will you want to have that many fields. But here's a trick that you can do. You can always establish a relationship just by simply dragging. Just dragging two things. Doesn't matter what it is. And as soon as you've dragged that connection between the two, you can always double-click the relationship option, bring it back up, and then choose the fields that you want to go to. In this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the portal, my global field, which I may rename, related to the ID. Now, in FileMaker, I believe I've talked about this. We'll click Change right now and make that change between this portal and the ID. And we'll say, okay, we have no need for turning any of these on currently because this is purely a display portal. We're using it to display a subset of records out of the potential tens or hundreds of thousands of records that this database could have. So this self-relationship means that we are going to be able to use a portal now based on products too. Now let me rename this to something that actually is a little bit more helpful. I think I'm probably out of the way, but let's go ahead and zoom this so that I'm for sure not. One of the things that I do is I like to name my table occurrences based on areas of use or what they explain. Now, a lot of people have called attention to the fact that I use this little character right here called a double chevron. Now, in my FileMaker systems, I like to do that just because it's very clear what the beginning part of a field, which will end up looking like this. Let's put it what it would be. And I'm just going to type out what you see in other FileMaker areas of FileMaker in the calculation engine and tell you why I use the double chevron and give you an alternative. So in other areas of FileMaker, that double colon is the designator that FileMaker uses throughout all of FileMaker between the table occurrence and your field name. Now, you can use any type of characters in the whole spectrum of FileMaker, because FileMaker is a UTF-16 application, to use. I just like the double chevron because it's very clear to me that it's an indication that this is a table occurrence portion of this full thing, which will be in the calculation engine, where I can see everything after the double colons is the field name. But if you, like some advanced developers, don't like to either include spaces, which I just highlighted, or this double chevron character, which, by the way, on the Mac is Option Shift Pipe character. That's the character above the return key. You can very easily, if you're going to use some type of other designation, use the double underscore. Or, which in FileMaker, we can't use the minus sign, which is that right there, but you can use what are known as EM dash. And they have a long version and a short version. So if I hold down the Option key on the Macintosh and hit the minus sign, that's actually a little bit of a longer dash. And if you do the Option and Shift key, it's an even longer dash. So you can get a dash representation within the naming of your table occurrences. But again, this is all really up to you in terms of how you like to name things. Now, the very important aspect to naming things here is that whatever is in the beginning is going to be alphabetically grouped together. So you're going to see, as I evolve this solution, what I attempt to do is give myself two indications. The first indication is what is the base table. Now, a lot of the times, some developers will put this at the very beginning, and that groups all of your base tables together, but it doesn't keep things coherent in terms of the whole of the solution, because if you're simply grouping all base tables together, you're going to end up with multiple groups of interconnected table occurrences, and those disassociated groups are simply grouping all together because the base table name is at the very beginning of the field, or of the name of all of the table occurrences. That isn't helpful, at least not to me, since FileMaker sorts everything alphabetically, until FileMaker gives us the ability to sort or filter when we're actually composing things. So this very beginning part I use as a designation of the general area, which forces us to group our table occurrences together, and then the base table after that tells me what that particular table occurrence, or what that layout and table occurrence, which base table it's actually tied to. So with self products now, it's very clear that when I make a selection from the context of products, and by the way, this will get renamed and this one as well, I know that this is a self relationship between the same table. And so now we can see as a result what happens when we use a different type of portal or a different portal in this scenario. We'll go into layout mode. And again, I already have a sidebar portal here. It's already got my styling and my themes. In FileMaker, you can always reassign things. You simply just have to be aware of all the different things that you might be taking along with you when you copy things. And that includes, like with fields, option dragging to make a duplicate of a field. This is a preferential one. You can always create a new field from, pull a new field from the fields area over here and just drag it out. That's going to come out raw, and you're going to get nothing on that field. If I take a field because it's already formatted the way that I want and I option drag that, I have to know that I'm taking a lot of other things with that operation. I'm taking tooltips, placeholders, hide calculations, conditional formatting. All those things, along with the styling to the actual object, is what I need to either be sure to get rid of or know that I'm wanting it. Oh, object name as well. So when you copy things, it's really up to you. I am going to take a copy of the portal because it already has, for example, a field in it. And I'm simply going to reassign by double-clicking this portal and choose that new relationship. That new relationship of self products means that the current context that I'm on, products, is able to see into itself, products, through a self relationship. Now, this self relationship is now going to allow me to have access to the additional portal options, such as further filtering this particular relationship. In fact, I have YouTube videos out there. If you want to see about filtering portals, just do a search on YouTube for filtering portals or on the magazine website. Now, in this scenario, we do not need to allow deletion. We do want to allow vertical scrolling. I'm just going to turn the bar on when scrolling. I'm not going to do it always, which sometimes you do want always. It's a good indicator. And I'll go ahead and leave my options here. So, self products is going to be showing, and let me select all of the rest of this content and push it off to the side so that we can have these side by side and see the difference. This is going to be, it's based off of that relationship. When we go back in there, and remember, it's based off of that field, that global field called portal, meaning one user will not be able to see in their portal the same thing as another user, which is very advantageous because it now, what one user does doesn't impact all other users. But of course, we're going to need that field on the layout. So I'm going to option drag and take the portal right there. It added a label, which I don't want. And I'm going to now have this be the case. In this particular example, this button, which we're going to see, there's a very key thing, a key distinction between what happens between the two types of portals. That was two types of portals. I'm going to need to modify this to fit the current context. The context of this portal is self products. So this button, as it is right now, which does not have anything assigned, we see as I double clicked it, it is currently doing nothing. But this merge value of company no longer applies in this scenario. So I need to get the context of this particular button. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to simply just select a piece of text. We go up to Insert, and at the bottom of the Insert menu, we are going to see this option of Merge Field. So I am able to grab as text from anywhere in FileMaker using this particular option of Merge Field, a field. Now what I want is I'm in a portal based on that self products relationship, so I need to select the same table occurrence to make sure that it's coming from that. So I'm going to specify company, and what we're going to see is we have the field right there, self products company. Now there's two things I can do in this particular scenario. I already have an object in the portal because I took advantage of this portal and simply just copied it over. Or I could delete this and then put in something new. Well, with FileMaker, we want to take the easy way. Having gone and used the insert a merge field, I'm simply just going to highlight everything that is the difference between the two. So I'm going to copy that, and I can now get rid of that temporary text. With this, I can double click. It will go into the button setup, this is one of the unique things that a button bar, as opposed to a button, have two different things. A button bar allows us to have the new functionality. A little icon would be here with the pencil. We would be able to use the calculation engine. But in this scenario, I am simply going to now just paste this because I don't want to mess with moving things around. I don't want to delete it, put a new one in, have to resize it, align it, whatever. I'm just going to modify this object directly. And I can always come in here and specify a script later, which is what I'm going to do. So, knowing that this portal is now set up correctly, this portal will only show things based on the contents of this global field. This is where, at the very beginning of this video, I talked about the filtering methods that we have possible in FileMaker. One is via relationship, and the second one is via finds. Those finds become super critical because you're going to be writing a script that will find a subset of data. You're going to take those values of that data and then put them into this portal, which then allows your portal to be a filter or a smaller subset of digestible amount of data. That means that we're not going to show 10,000 items. We're not going to show 10 and just have them paginate through them. We're going to show them exactly what we want that portal to show. So if we do, say, for example, let's do a find right here. I go into find mode, and I think I might have more than one on bathroom. Nope. Let's do a find. What does other have? This is where these really don't apply. Windows, do I have more than one? I do not have more than one. All right, we're going to do this another way. I'm going to do a show all, and I'm simply going to remove some of these items with an omit. So in order to create a record set that is something that I want to work with, I am going to use this omit record, or this command T, in order to create a fixed found set. So I'm going to go say, for example, go to this blank record and omit it, go to this blank record, let's select renew error, omit that one, omit Weddy, and we'll omit this one. So we're going to pretend that this is a representation with these 3 records out of the 8. It's a representation of the data that I want to show in a portal. Let's say it was a search for some particular key of Windows, and it's a list of Windows providers because that's what my user is searching for. All I need to do is get the ID values for all of those and put those into the portal. And that's what we're going to do, is we're going to learn to write a script that will take the current key values and actually put them in. Now, I'm going to show you a hidden FileMaker trick right now. This is why you're watching these videos. This is what's great about, I have tons of stuff like this over at FileMakerMagazine.com. I can get all of these ID values with one powerful function, which we want to know as developers, but we do not want users to know because it can be extremely dangerous. FileMaker has a particular option, and you'll see right here when we go to records, we have this option right here, replace field contents with command equal. This is actually super dangerous. Having it exposed to users, not a cool thing, but it is. We will select into this global field. Now, we know that this is global, but when we replace on a global field, it's only doing it for the current user, and you can actually use this as a trick in order to build up a list of values. And you can even script this, which is really cool. You don't have to write a loop that loops through a found set. In order to set a global, you can actually use this one function. So when we go to replace field contents, and we have this option of replace with nothing, replace with serial numbers, or here, our most powerful, replace with calculated result. What we're essentially doing here, as I bring up a super large dialog box, is we are replacing into a global field anything we want across this range of records. So this is what I love about FileMaker. This is nowhere in the manual. This is nothing you can find anywhere. It just comes from knowing FileMaker and having worked with it for 30 years. What I can do is I can use a list function, and this is exactly what you would write in the script. I can list, and the list function will include whatever you want. This and that. So those two combined values will be combined in this format right here, where it would be this and then that. It actually just injects a return between that. We want the return because what this global field called portal currently is holding is going to be a returned limited list of key values. So what we want to do is we want to take whatever is currently in that field along with what's coming from every possible record. So this is a really easy situation where we say we want you to list and combine together whatever is currently in the actual global field of portal along with whatever is the current ID. And let's see right here, current table. Right here, notice that you can select between the current layout and whatever fields are on the layout or whatever is in the current table. This is a big thing because currently on my current layout, I do not have my internal ID field. So we want to make sure and switch this to the current table, giving us a full listing of all fields. Well, now I can combine this. So what this is going to do, in essence, is it goes across all three records, you attempting to replace the contents of a field. But because we're not replacing a field that's stored in the database, we're replacing on a global, which is actually stored in memory, we're simply building up a list of all of the ID values using this one function. It's just really, really cool. So, and you always want to make sure whenever you're doing the replace, I always like to select it and copy it to the clipboard so that I know if I want to rerun that replace again, I can always just paste it off of the clipboard. Now, in this scenario, I am really comfortable with this replace field contents because I know I'm doing it on a global field. It's not actually writing to the actual field in the database of data that I'm interested in storing. If you are a cautious person, do not use this particular feature that I'm showing you, replace field contents, on a field that you care about. It's always a good idea to create a separate field called sandbox or whatever you want to call it, clipboard, and replace on that field referencing your actual data fields. Because at one time that you make a mistake with replace field contents, there's no going back. Well, the only way you can go back is if you go get a backup copy of your database if you've been making backup copies on FileMaker server. Once you do a replace, that's it. The writing is done. You cannot undo. There is no going back. In this case, we replace, and there you go. There's the result that I'm looking for. I get a listing of all of my key values in this portal. Now, if everything worked out properly, which it currently did not, in my what's the interest? Why is this not showing? Let's see. We want to double check and make sure that our object is contained within the portal. We go to the objects area. My button is coming from the same portal. We can see self products company, and it is showing the company name. I do have the keys in my portal. I go to my relationship graph. I look, and the products portal is related to the ID. It should be showing. I will probably at this point have to pause the video, find out what the issue is, but this is exactly what you will hit many, many times throughout your FileMaker career, is why is something not showing? And I can see out of my peripheral vision right here, it is in fact showing, and this is a very good learning lesson. FileMaker, it used to be that FileMaker would render any window by default constantly and forever. But that was actually a performance hit that FileMaker had to start to add new features and functionality, which was not rendering new areas. So if I take this out and delete this and click, we can see that it goes away. If I rerun that function right there by going up to records, replace field contents. We go back to the replace. We specify. I paste it off of my clipboard. I run OK. I replace it. We can see that the portal has not updated. I am currently active in a field. I click outside of that field, and the portal still does not update. That's because FileMaker's rendering engine, and you'll hit this throughout your development, FileMaker has not decided to update that particular portal. Now, sometimes there is a function called, we'll go into scripts and we'll go to, let me make a sandbox script right now. Sandbox. Always nice to have a script up at the very top that is just something where you can play with scripts. We've got, what is it? Flush. There we go. Flush cache to disk. This is a very infrequent script step that you will use. There's also one that will update a portal. You've got refresh. All of your refresh script steps are designed to cause the whole of the layout to render. You can refresh a portal right there. You can also refresh objects within a portal, or you can do a complete window refresh. But many times when your portal is not updating, if you've tied this to a script trigger or to a button in your UI, this refresh portal will many times get your portal to update. But in this particular case, I don't need that step because, having seen the lesson, if I'm in a development process, I can go into layout mode, come back into browse mode, and lo and behold, there are my records. By virtue of having just done that, FileMaker is now showing this window for the first time. It has to refresh, and we can see that indeed my portal is actually refreshing. Now, here is the biggest distinction between these two portal types. We've learned that this portal, the master detail portal, the one that FileMaker defaults to, when I click on these objects, which they are the same, if I double click, we can see that this is a button with a do nothing. There's nothing that's happening. Over here, when I double click on this one, it also is a button, quite clearly, that is doing nothing. But this is a big distinction between these two where you gain control from a navigation standpoint. If I click here, we can see that clicking, even though the button is set to do nothing, it is literally taking me to the other records. Whereas in this portal, when I click on these rows, you can see, by virtue of the fact that we have no change here, it is simply just selecting that portal row. This is where you get to control what happens. If on the sidebar, you don't want the sidebar to act as a navigation, taking the user to particular places, and you don't want the current found set to control what's shown in that portal, then you're going to use a self relationship, because this is where you get to control what happens. So here I can actually make a selection. I could show a button that when I make a selection that says go, which actually will then take me to that record, or do whatever it is that I want to write for a script that's attached to that button. So, in this video, we have learned a couple of lessons. One is that we are able to use a portal based on what we want that portal to do. If we don't want it to be representative of the found set, which we're thinking ahead, if it's got a lot of data, we don't necessarily want FileMaker to always show all of that data, because remember, FileMaker is an all or nothing database. If in our list of fields for the products, if our field count said 1,000 record or 1,000 fields, we have to know that in FileMaker, and the way that it works, in this portal, even though we are showing one field, when FileMaker goes to request those records from server and retrieve them back, it is retrieving all however many fields. If there's 1,000, it's retrieving all 1,000 fields and all of that data, and you are paying the penalty for the fact that you have so many fields, even though you want to show one. So we have to know that that's how it works, and we always want to think about that when we're designing in our database. How can we keep our tables really narrow? Search on YouTube here for narrow versus wide tables, and you've got another video that you'll be able to understand more about this particular topic. But we now know that we can use a self relationship to have a portal where we can take control, write the script to do what we want it to do, and we get to determine what's going to happen. I think that's the direction I'm going to take in this database, at least from the product standpoint. We're going to see in the next video I am going to talk about searching. Searching being one of our primary methods of filtering, we want to know, are we going to use FileMaker's area up at the top here with regards to quick find? And how does quick find impact us? It'll be the first script that we're going to actually write in this series, where we are going to use a global field called search, and we are going to write our own script that essentially does the same thing as what we get in FileMaker's UI. Because sometimes we don't want to give users access to all of these buttons, and what ends up happening is we want to hide FileMaker's UI because we want full control over the user experience. And that's what we'll be talking about in the next video in this series. So I hope this video has helped you out to learn more about FileMaker. Feel free to check out more videos over at FileMakerMagazine.com if you really want to go in depth. Tons of content. And of course, you'll have access to this file as well if you're a subscriber. I'd like to wish you much luck until next time, much luck and happy FileMaking.
We hope you've enjoyed this video tutorial, and we'd like to say thank you for your subscription and your support. If you're not already a subscriber, head on over to www.filemakermagazine.com/subscribe for more information about the benefits of joining.